So I want to talk a little bit about leadership and adaptive challenge, and one thing we have to get rid of is the hero myth of leadership. There's a tendency, both on the leadership end and those being led end, of expecting our leaders to come in and fix everything. We see this with, the President of the United States, like he or she has control of everything. No. But also there's a temptation of the person in leadership to play the expert because they feel like a lot of their authority comes from having all the answers. And when you're leading adaptively, you have to be in the unknowing place with the rest of the people that you're leading. So the hero myth needs to go out the window when we talk about leading adaptively. So there's this model of authority-based, actually these are different aspects of different kinds of leadership and the tasks associated with them. And this is all Ron Heifetz's stuff, or most of it is Ron Heifetz and Linsky and Grashow. We all know about authority-based leadership. This is the CEO of the corporation. This is the pastor in some polities, or it might be the Pope would definitely be in the area of authority-based leadership. And then there's also relationship-based leadership. And when I was moderator of our congregation, this is how I led, is that I tended to ask people that I knew to serve on committees or to serve on the board with me. There was this relational element. So my social capital, if you were, of friendships and of being in a relationship with others in the congregation was the way I led at that time in my own development and in the congregations. They were still sort of in a pastoral level of the way we related to one another. And then there's the adaptive leadership, where you really have to lead beyond the authority that's official authority that you might have, and beyond relationships. So there's a different way of needing to learn how to lead.
And these are in a triangle with authority at the base of the economies?
The authority at the base, I think, is because that's the most familiar. It's the easiest in a lot of ways. Although I would argue that in today's economy and business climate and the world, the bigger competition of the world, that fewer and fewer CEOs can really run a company well from authority alone. I mean, they still get a lot of the credit, whether they deserve it or not, but really there has to be, they have to really flatten their decision making, because the people who are in the trenches, if you will, are the ones who really have an understanding of the problems and possible solutions. So I think we're going to hold on to that because we're very attached to that model. And I think, the relationship-based leadership, I also think of this as being sort of the soft leadership and soft power. You could almost look at those as using the old, like the biblical model of the head of the household, but the wife is the neck upon which the head turns. There's these ways of influencing decisions that aren't from like official authority, but we still have convening authority. So that's another way of looking at those two, where adaptive is really throwing both of those out and envisioning something completely different. And actually, the other part of this is that both of those have a level of coercion to them. And the adaptive leadership is I wouldn't want to say it's persuasive as much, but it's a willingness to address the challenge with beginner's mind, the leaders along with everyone else who is involved.
And might there be, I don't think it's black and white. I think there's sometimes when a leader has to be the person who makes the decision.
Right.
And then maybe it's the balance is so.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, I try to myself lead adaptively. So we have this leadership development team in the district, and I'm my goal, or my mission, if you will, is to really involve a lot of different points of view into how we provide leadership training in the district. But at the same time, I need to make sure there's a leadership day that happens in the fall. So there's certain things that, just to make it happen, I might push, use my authority as the staff person to call a church and get a date on the calendar and things like that. But at the same time, as much as I can, I try to flatten the to have the opportunity for different people to give input and ideas and things like that. So it's a dance. So yeah, there's definitely, you still have to, paychecks still have to go out, taxes still have to be paid, there's certain things that need to happen no matter what. So Heifetz talks about adaptive challenges being challenges for which there are no simple, painless solutions, problems that require us to learn new ways. So some of the problems we have in our congregations or challenges is how do we have truly intergenerational community? Stewardship, how do we make sure that we're able to fund our mission? Multiculturalism, how do we, as a traditionally WASP, upper middle class denomination, how can we reimagine ourselves in a way that could be truly multicultural? And there's also the reality of people just not having any religion as part of their lives, and how do we engage with that? So those are all really clear adaptive challenges that we're facing as Unitarian Universalists. So in order to make progress on these problems, we just don't have some person who comes in with all the answers, and as tempting as that might be, and I know district staff has often played that role, that you call the district staff person and they come in and give you the solution to your problem. Instead, we have to learn ourselves how we can change our own attitudes, our own behavior, and maybe shift some of our values. In growth, this shows up a lot. There's if you're going from a pastoral size or family size church to a program church, there's the idea of if you go to 2 services, you're not all going to be able to worship together. That's a shift in value that how do we reimagine ourselves in a way that we want to, where inclusivity is more important than the intimacy that we have right now. So this new kind of leadership requires a new social contract. I like that, that really promotes our own adaptive capabilities. So part of this is, as leaders, modeling mistake making, modeling being in the not knowing, modeling sharing leadership as well, modeling inclusivity, which is another thing. I'm in this book on creativity that I'm reading. He points out all these examples of where people who aren't the experts are the ones who tend to come up with the most creative ideas. He uses an example of this guy who was a chemist, and through a series of personal life events, he ended up bartending in the evenings as sort of a social kind of thing. And as a chemist, he was interested in learning how the drinks went together and stuff. And then he decided to start experimenting. So he used his chemistry knowledge to do things like, wow, I know that fats interact with alcohol in a certain way. So what would happen if I took bacon and fried bacon and then soaked it in alcohol and then removed the fats but left the essence of the bacon? So he came up with the idea of bacon-infused bourbon. But it's something that a bartender would never have thought of. But the fact that he was a chemist and had this sensibility but knew enough about bartending, he was able to introduce this completely new concept into bartending. So, I mean, I hear about that now, but this had happened in New York City, that he ended up bartending at some swanky bar with all these, new and crazy drinks that he would try on people. But there's an example of just a completely, coming at a problem with a completely different mindset and experience to come up with a really innovative solution.